Hello, fellow travelers, and welcome to Versus Stars podcast, third season. All my loyal listeners, thank you for your continued support. And remember, click that subscribe button, everybody. It's an amazing episode because Kelly Thompson returns from the mothership. She's the writer of Birds of Prey from DC Comics. Now, come aboard as we go traversing the stars. Hi, Miss Thompson. Thank you so much for coming back to the Traversing the Stars podcast.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, Jeff. I'm glad to be back.
It's absolutely my pleasure. And now this is a very special interview because if I understand correctly, we're going to be talking about Birds of Prey, which is your first book for DC for the DC universe. Is that correct?
It's my first book. I did do one short in that Harley Quinn, the Black, White, and Redder, number one. Actually, I got the chance to do a really fun 10-page Harley Quinn story with Annie Wu drawing, which was dream come true stuff. So that was technically my first work at DC, but Birds of Prey is my first actual book. Yeah.
Well, the thing with Birds of Prey, that's one of the most iconic female-led books I think in all comic books right now. At least I can remember. So, what does it mean for you to be working on this title?
Oh, I mean, it's huge. I mean, I think you're right that there are very few sort of female-led teams that are primarily female characters and that have often been helmed by female powerhouses. You know, Gail Simone and Nicola Scott obviously have really famous runs on the book, long, very beloved runs. So it's great. And there aren't a lot of those out there. You know, I worked on A-Force at Marvel, and certainly they had Defenders was female led at one point, Lady Liberators back in the day, but it's pretty rare. And it's certainly rare to have something that's got this kind of pedigree and history that Birds of Prey does. So it's a huge opportunity, and I was really excited and grateful for it. But I would also say that if you look at my career, it's clear that I've been gunning for exactly that kind of book since I started. So
Well, I think the last time we spoke was, like I said, a couple of years ago. Was I think you were doing Captain Marvel at the time, and that was not a team book because obviously it was a solo title, but you virtually made a female team around the character.
yeah, I was joking about this on an interview I did a few weeks back about I do sort of stealth make all my books into team books, and it might be a little bit driven by, one of my favorite editors when I was at Marvel and favorite people is Sana Amanat. And I just butchered her last name. I'm sorry, Sana. And the she said at one point, and it was pretty early in my career, she and I were really working on Hawkeye and stuff, but she'd seen me try takes on team stuff. And she said, sort of offhanded to me, she said, I think you do better with solo books. And as much as I love her, I took that personally. So, I set my sights on like, well, how do I really make these team books sing? And so, but I think it's also just a practical thing. I do, it's really hard to sustain an ongoing book. And if you can build great supporting casts full of characters who also have fans, it's a good way to sort of grow that community a little bit, I find. I mean, most of my books get canceled, so, what do I know? But Captain Marvel did make it the big 50 milestone, so maybe I know what I'm doing. You like to think so.
Well, I would imagine so, and there's very few titles that do make it past 50 nowadays. Anyway, regardless of how well they do.
It's hard. It's hard no matter what you're doing. Yeah.
So, as you mentioned, the Birds of Prey was famously done by Gail Simone. It's a team book that's had many different lineups over the course of, I think, three or four relaunches. What makes it a Birds of Prey, other than being all female? What to you is a cast of characters that is Birds of Prey?
Well, I don't think you have to be all female, first of all, but you do have to certainly be majority female. Um, And I mean, it's sort of like the inverse of what you see. If you're going to have a dude, it's like a token dude, the way, so many books have a token female character. Um, so but I do think primarily a female cast you need. To me, either Barbara or Dinah has to be involved because they were the original creators of the book. It started out, it was just them. I think I think even if you're going to do what we did and start with just one of them, the other one still has to be like mentioned. I would never have done our book. I mean, I know it's pretty controversial for people that we didn't start with both Dinah and Babs on the team, but I never would have done it with Dinah leading the team if we weren't at least alluding to something with Barbara, some reason that she's not involved, some plot point that's going to be developing that we're going to explore. So, issue 6 is a big issue for us in a lot of ways, wrapping up our first arc, and Barbara appears in that issue. And I think some of the plotting mechanisms are going to be revealed in such a way that I don't know if people will like them or not, but I think it'll make more sense to people who were maybe worried about it or critical. That doesn't mean they'll love it. I don't know, but at least they can see the reasoning behind the machine, which sometimes helps.
Yeah, and like I said, the team you created is very eclectic. I mean, Black Canary, Sandra Kane, Big Barda, Harley Quinn, Meridian, and Zealot. Those is a very interesting range of the history of DC Universe on this team, from some classic characters, newer characters, Wildstorm character, very well, 70, sorry, Jack Kirby, with Big Barda.
Yeah.
So why did you just select this team? Is it just because they fit this mission the best? Or was something else about these characters' interaction with each other that you thought this is the team I have to put together?
Well, I kind of came at it from a couple angles. First of all, I didn't want to create a team that had already been famous under Gale. I mean, I'm not saying you can't build on what she did. You can, but like she's already developed those characters and those beautiful relationships and all that stuff. And like, yes, reassembling the band is fun, but for me, it's a little more interesting to like reassemble a slightly different band and like see how those characters bounce against each other and what kind of magic you get or don't get. I mean, sometimes you put some characters together and it doesn't quite work right and you don't know why. And sometimes you put them together like Barda and Cascane and you're like, oh, that's magic. Let's
Hmm.
do more of that. So I think it's a little bit of that, me just reaching for characters that I thought were interesting and that I thought were interesting to bang together. I certainly reached for some of my favorites. Big Barda is a favorite of mine. Cassandra Cain is one of my favorite characters in all of comics. I'm a very big fan of Zealot, and I saw an opportunity in this book to really show her off to people who maybe weren't really familiar with her or didn't sort of understand how interesting she could be. Um, so there was a little bit of a mission statement there from me about that was why I was interested in Zealot. I also just thought she was off the beaten path. As I think people who are reading the book, and certainly it'll be made more clear in issue 6, part of what Dinah was doing was trying to create a team that's a bit unexpected. That's not just all the same people. It's not just she, Barbara, and Huntress, storming Themyscira. It's a strange group. And that's for purpose, which sort of comes together in the end here, I hope. We'll see. I'm pretty excited about that last issue. I think it really wraps things together in a really great way. I hope people will love it. Or the
Uh,
last issue of the first arc, I mean, issue
right, right.
6.
And of all these great characters, was there one character that, as you wrote them, you found them even more interesting than you thought they'd be as you got started?
I think I think Barda for me was even more fun than I expected. I really enjoyed her voice, and also my editor Ben, he hadn't said he was on the fence about Barda or anything. He hadn't given any clue that he didn't trust me there or anything, which is the mark of a good editor. Let you go ahead and get yourself in trouble or not. But he really loved the way I wrote her, and I think it really made me feel great that he really responded to that, even though I don't know that he would have said he was like the biggest Barda fan, and then he just really loved her in our book, and that made me feel great about that. Um, I think Zealot, I think I figured out the right plot for her. And so that sort of was fun. I think Harley is tricky. I was nervous about it because people really love her or hate her, and it can be really overwhelming. But I felt like I found the right balance for her. Honestly, the hardest person to write was Cass. And it wasn't because she was hard, it was because I hadn't having never gotten to write her before, I just
Hmm.
didn't realize how much real estate you need to leave for her in order to let her leave an impact so much, right? She's a woman of action. And in a solo book, that's easy to achieve. I mean, I think of like writing Black Widow or something. There's so much action in that book, and that's a pretty laconic character too, Black Widow, or at least under my pen. She's not a big wisecracking kind of a character. So I hadn't really, it hadn't really occurred to me that in the team scenario, if she's not going to talk a lot, which she's not going to because that's who she is, you got to give her room. to like do stuff because that's how she shines, you know? And so I did have a little bit of trouble. Like she really drops off in two and even three a little bit where you really just don't see much of her. And it's because she's in the shadows doing stuff and not talking about it.
Hmm.
But it can be tricky. I had fun with it. It was better when I found like in issue four, she's a big part of the fight, but then also she just disappears from the book and you're like, where the hell is she? And then she pops up not not in the jail cell. And like, so to me, like, that's a great way to really highlight some of the ways in which Cass is great. But it did take me by surprise. And it took me a minute to get the balance right because she was heavily featured in issue one. And so it was easy. It was fine. But then in two and three, I hadn't really broken out, how to give her a lot of room on the page.
Hmm.
And it took me until four to like get that right. So.
Well, and I think some of the characters that you chose, for instance, like Big Barda, I think just having the character there makes the Black Canary so much more impressive because you're looking at a 250-year-old warrior that is super strong. I mean, she can go toe to toe with Wonder Woman. She's been under the rule of Darkseid. I mean, she knows how to handle herself, and yet she's willing to let leadership be the Black Canaries, which says I think it's so much more about Black Canary in many ways. But she's not doing, and I think that's an interesting choice of a character to put alongside the Black Canary.
Yeah, that's interesting. I don't really think of Barda as wanting to be so much a leader because we often think of her as paired with, you tend to either see her either paired with Scott or in team scenarios, and she's almost never the team leader in those scenarios either. And so I do tend to think of her as being pretty good at being a team player, but you're right that Barda has a very indomitable will that is not, she basically has to decide to go along with it, like she has to make a decision in her mind. She's going to do what you tell her. And then she's like, all right,
Hmm.
but she is a very like singular character. It's true. That's actually my theory on, I write her a little bit fish out of water, which, shouldn't really be true for her. She's been on Earth a long time, but my take on her is sort of like Barda doesn't assimilate, she's like too powerful for that. She's too singular minded for that,
Hmm.
to I mean if the mega rod isn't going to influence her, what she's going to let American society run? No. No, no, not gonna happen. I mean, she'll absorb what she likes, she loves it here. She comes from a hell world, so it's great here for her, but she's not gonna assimilate and become like a valley girl or something,
And how fun was it to have her square off against Wonder Woman? You must have been dying
Oh,
for that scene.
I was so excited. I was so excited. That was my favorite issue. And listen, you're excited for it, and then you find out Leo is your artist for sure. Like you're like, we got him, really? Oh my God, I'm so excited. And then you got really excited because I knew what he could bring to that. Like he brought so much to that book. And reading issue four definitely has the least dialogue of any of the issues. And I just had a smile pasted on my face when we got it in because it was just so great that fight. He just nailed it.
And when we think about the two of those two characters, Wonder Woman, the Amazon, Big Barda, Farmer Fury, there's a certain similarity to them, and definitely though they're almost dramatic foes of each other on some level, in that they're both warriors, but where they came from, Wonder Woman, the place of love, Big Barda came from the apocalypse, the place of hell, and yet there's certain level at the center that's the same. So how did that help you having them go against each other, view each character individually?
Yeah, I think in the Venn diagram of Barda and Wonder Woman, there's a ton of overlap, but you're right that the parts that don't overlap are drastically different. Like Wonder Woman has been raised in real love, not that there isn't controversy or danger or drama in Themyscira or being an Amazon, but it's a very loving, supportive environment. And Barda was basically raised like scot-free in hell. I mean, they're basically tortured all the time. And so that is going to change you. I think it's part of what makes Barda so great is that she's just like a very matter of fact character who does good and is trying to make the world better, but she also doesn't like wring her hands over things the way that Wonder Woman does. And I think she probably is far less compassionate. Does she have compassion for people? Of course, but once you're raised in like the absolute worst conditions anyone could ever imagine and you're immortal basically, so you could do that forever. I think it just doesn't make you as relatable as a person, and it probably makes it harder for you to relate to, like Barda would hate me. I'd be like complaining about my knee, and she'd be like, "Why? Stop with the complaining." And I'd be like, "Okay, Barda." I just think so. And Wonder Woman is not like that. Wonder Woman is like, let us help you with your knee, and I'd be like, "Okay, thanks, Wonder Woman." There's very different methods.
Yeah, and I said another really interesting character too, as you mentioned, is Harley Quinn on the team. Harley Quinn. I mean, even though in many ways she's kind of moved over to this to being a hero, she's been in so many heroic books and whatnot, but she's still this X factor. How comfortable is Black Canary with having or being responsible for whatever damage Harley Quinn's going to cause along the way?
I think Dinah, when they separate, Dinah keeps Harley with her, and I think that's partly to keep an eye on her and keep her from going off map too much, but it's also to protect her a little bit, because I would argue that every single person except for Harley that Dinah brings to that island can take on any Amazon. Those are some of the best fighters in all of the DC universe. And I value Amazon. I rate the Amazons very highly, but there's a big gap between Wonder Woman and your average Amazon. And I think these are some of the most elite fighters in DC, and you can expect them to beat your average Amazon. You just can't expect them to beat your average Wonder Woman.
Mm.
So to me, Harley is the only one who's sort of outmatched there on just a hand-to-hand fighting kind of a situation. So in that respect, um, I think Dinah had a lot of concerns as well. Like, not only does she not want Harley getting anyone killed, but she doesn't want Harley getting killed, because Dinah's a
Mm.
good guy. She doesn't want anyone killed. At the same time, she knows what kind of a mission she's going on. And the whole reason she's bringing some of these people is because they're dangerous. And so that's why Harley's there. And I think Dinah just keeps her with her in in hopes of containing that thing she needs in a way that will be helpful to her.
Is there a potential that she's not thinking as clearly as she could be with how she's approaching this?
100%. I mean, I think she was probably thinking pretty clearly when she was starting out, when she was like, when we see those scenes of her like trying to put the team together and thinking about what she needs. But I do think for the most of the time that she's going through this run, she's emotionally like very vulnerable and maybe not making the best call, the same way anyone maybe doesn't when their child or their relative is involved that they care about, that they're a caretaker for. You just become a little unreasonable, right?
Because Dinah, treats a little emotional compromise on how she approached this mission, maybe even how she assembled her team. After this mission is over and she can kind of relax a little bit, how do you think she'll look at her team moving forward?
I think I can't answer that because issue 6 addresses it directly.
Okay, no problem. Like I said, I
Like
don't have
there's a
any
big no,
spoilers.
no, it's a great question, but like the turn on 6 will directly comment on that. So I think you'll be satisfied with like a big answer there, sort of a turn.
Okay. So I might get this name wrong. Megara?
Yeah, I mean, there are a couple ways to say it, but Megara is, yeah.
Megara.
Hmm.
So I must say I really loved the character. And without knowing what happens next, I hope that the villain doesn't go away for too long because it's a great villain. And I
Yeah.
really like her comment when she tells Sin that sometimes there's nothing in people but sarcasm. And
Yeah.
she's I must admit, a truly beautiful, written character. I really was impressed by that. But my thought was Megara's ability to watch and read the minds of people. How does that alter how she viewed us?
Well, I think that's part of it. She thinks we suck. Like, she's fascinated by us and she wants it. She like Megara is of the three Furies. I mean, there's a lot of different, Greek and all this different interpretations of things through the old classics and stuff. But one of the common accepted things about Megara is that she's the Fury that's mostly focused on jealousy. And it was one of the reasons I picked her, where she seemed like the fit of the one that would become jealous over time of what she never got, and this start craving and aching for this attempt to live a real life. And but I sort of, like she speaks more normally
Mm.
to American voice than Barda does, Megara does. And that's because she is assimilating. Like, unlike Barda, who does not want to assimilate because she is herself and always will be, Megara wants to be something else. Megara wants to be a human. She wants to feel all those things and try all those things and see if they're idiots, if they can be better or whatever. Like, she just wants a piece of it. And so I think she's really interesting in that way. I had fun playing with the fact that she could know all this stuff, but like not have any experience, and that will make her bad at things, if she was successful, but it also makes her sort of interesting. I think she's a fascinating character, and you guys will definitely be seeing more of her.
And I think the interesting thing with her is that once again, talking about her perception of us, that how she can perceive us. I don't know if it's pessimistic or optimistic, but does her that make her opinion on us more honest or more warped?
I I think I think it makes her opinion pretty honest. I think she's a truth teller character for sure, like Barda, which I'm a big fan of. I think people, when they're building teams or like talking about things they like in teams, they always tend to want to put the same characters together, and it's characters that are all similar personalities or similar desires or goals or whatever, and that's a mistake. I mean, it's okay to put a few of those together, but you need characters that contrast that too. If
Hmm.
you really want that spark within that team dynamic, you need some oil to go with your water. It's why you need a Harley Quinn with a all serious team. It's why you need you need a sort of truth teller character. The example I give a lot is that, when Cordelia became part of the Buffy gang in the Scooby gang in the Buffy the Vampire Slayer show, it was great. People loved it. People
Hmm.
responded to that character, but mostly I think they were responding to the dynamic being interesting of putting her with these three friends who were like always agreeing with each other. And then you throw this oil in there
Hmm.
and it becomes more interesting. And there's a reason that when she rolled off in season 3, they brought Spike in, a new truth teller character that's sort of at odds with people. It creates interesting angles. It's like the whole thing of why I wanted to put together some interesting characters that hadn't spent a lot of time working together, because fun things happen.
She mentions in a comment that she'd be happy to stay with Dinah and Ollie if it was offered to her, which I thought was a great scene, a great line.
I'm
So,
sorry, it's very bad to laugh at my own jokes, but I just think she's funny. I just think she's like a jerk. It's in like a very like human way. Like she's being a very human already, like.
so how much of that is sarcasm? How much of that is actually revealing a certain level of loneliness with this character?
Both, yes, 100%. I'm so glad you said that. That's so good you got that. Yes, it's both. It's partly her being a dick. Like she's like, "Hey, I'm gonna need a place to stay," and it's partly like she doesn't know what to do. Like if she doesn't, if she gets what she wants and she takes over Sin and she blows everything up, like is that really what she wants, or does she really
Hmm.
want to like live in an apartment somewhere? Like it's a little unclear. And I think that is part of what's fun about what she wants and what's happening.
That'd be a fascinating motivation for a villain. They just want to live in an apartment. They just
Yeah,
want
just want to,
a nice little place
yeah,
to rent in New York where the
yeah.
rent is
They'd
high.
like to keep a plant alive and
Right.
order some Chinese takeout. I don't know, man. It's simple
it, would,
things.
it'd be the most interesting rogues villain to be possible. Another like another character that doesn't have a lot of moments but is interesting is Meridian.
Yeah.
She's not like the biggest, the most well-known character, especially on that team. So what got you to want to have her on the team, which is kind of was again a very unique character that hasn't had a lot of play yet?
Yeah, so I'm a huge fan of maps. Mia Mizuki from the Gotham Academy stuff. If people don't know her, that's where she's from. She's a kid at Gotham Academy. She's incredible. She loves maps and geography and treasure hunting and mysteries, and she's amazing. I love her. And I would love to write her, but I knew I couldn't write her here. I needed a time traveler. Once my things started coming together, I needed a time traveler. And she made a lot of sense to me as someone who I didn't want to give her a boatload of powers, you know. I wanted her powers and her badassery in the future to come mostly from being smart, being clever, her knowledge of history and geography and all these things that she's interested in. And so I tried to make her more into this tech character who's like inventing things and stuff. There is some, I hope, really cool stuff that we're going to get to about how she became exactly how she is today. I hope we're going to see that in the third arc, the 9 through 13 arc. She's definitely still around in this book. But yeah, she doesn't get nearly as much shine as I'd like in this first arc. And I knew that was going to happen, but I still didn't get quite as much in there as I wanted. But I knew with the plans we had that there was still going to be time to do a lot of this stuff in 7 through, whatever. Although you get a big piece of it in 6. So hopefully that'll excite people. And then Leo did that incredible costume design and like oh yeah, it's so fun. I mean that helmet. I love that helmet so much. Like I want her to take the helmet off sometimes because I want people to know it's her and like, see her face and everything. But I love the costume so much. I'm like, never take it off. He did this one from issue, I think it's 3, where it's just like a white panel. It's like silhouetted of maps in the Meridian in the costume and Zealot. And it's like one of my favorite panels from the whole thing because it just looks like a crazy, like here's this woman with swords and then here's this sci-fi laser gun woman. And what are they doing together? I love it.
So, what do listeners have to look forward to in the upcoming issues of Birds of Prey? What can you tease a little bit?
So, all right. So this issue 6 is the last issue of arc 1. I'm very excited about it. As people I believe know, Barbara shows up in that issue. And like I said, in addition to wrapping this up, we get sort of a twist in some of the reveals with Meridian and what's some of the stuff that's been going on behind the scenes. And then we're leaping into a 2-issue arc drawn by Javier Pina, who I'm a big fan of, who has drawn Birds of Prey before, long ago, briefly, a few issues maybe? I can't remember. But he also did some of my Captain Marvel, my Brood arc, and also my issue 50, my final issue. He loves drawing big, beautiful arms on women, so I'm a big fan of that. We're having a lot of fun. This arc is 7 and 8. It's sort of tentatively called Undercover Animals, but I don't know. I mean, this one was called Megadeth, so we have a lot of fun. But Vixen is this is a big. I'm worried people who are looking for her aren't going to pick up issue 7 and just pick up issue 8. But like, she's in a lot of 7. Like, she's a fight scene in 7 and everything, so she's in it from 7 on. So 7 is Barda, Cass, Vixen, Meridian, Dinah, of course. And as they're sort of coming to terms with what's next following what's happened. Um, so that's a 2-issue arc that leads directly into our third arc, which starts with number 9. I don't know how much I can say about that one yet, but it's pretty wild.
Well, sounds awesome. Thank you so much, Miss Thompson. It was an absolute honor to speak with you.
Thank you so much for having me, Jeff. I had a great time.
For my pleasure. Please come back anytime. Thank you for listening to another episode of the Traverse of the Stars podcast. Please help me battle the algorithms by liking and subscribing. Be sure to return for the next episode when Steve Fox returns to discuss Dead X-Men from Marvel Comics. Until next voyage, travel on.